Drink Georgetown Tavern Beer, your new locally brewed domestic style lager. 4.2% alcohol. Cheap, good, local.
That's how we describe Dugar, cheap and local. Ladies and gentlemen, Michael-Shawn Dugar from The Athletic. It's been a couple weeks since we've talked to Mike with schedules and all. So, Mike, how are you doing? Have you changed at all? Are you good?
No, I'm okay. Still cheap and local, I guess. If I was before, I still am. I'm doing good. Just trying to enjoy a little break in the off season before things get real busy on draft weekend.
Yeah, the draft weekend is almost upon us. Yeah, you kind of hit a little bit of a dead period here right now before the draft heats up. But I'm going to ask you kind of the same question I asked Garofola. What do you think day one or even the first 2 days of the draft are going to be like? Do you sense Seattle being very active or kind of staying put with where they're at right now?
Yeah, I think they're more likely to be active probably than teams that are at the top of the draft and like the trade back world. Because it just sounds like this is one of those years where having a high pick is not like super great, particularly if you need a quarterback. So you may see teams that have, the guy that goes 15th, a team might have had him on their board at like 38. And everything is comparable in that same range. So you might see some guys like, hey, let's go up to get this dude, whereas the Seahawks may be like, all right, well, we're really stingy with our first round picks. I wouldn't be surprised if this year John has like 7 first round grades on prospects, which is a really low number. I think the most he said he's ever had is like 18 or something in that range. So he's pretty stingy in that regard. So it wouldn't surprise me if they try to take advantage of that at 18, because it's far more likely that they don't have someone available at 18 who they do have a first round grade on. So that's when they can try to get busy in the trade market. I see them real busy maybe in that range and ending up with a haul like 2017. I think they ended up with like 6 or something picks in the first 110. Ended up with a haul. Most of those guys didn't pan out. But in terms of activity, I could see something similar coming out of the first couple days.
Can you get a sense coming out of just the meetings at all which way that they would be leaning in the draft or not? Is that just kind of the week of, hey, smoke and mirrors, we're trying to trick everyone what we're going to do?
I don't think they know. I don't think they know yet. Because of what I was mentioning about the grades, like I say, you got 8 first round grades on guys. At 18, you're probably screwed, right? But who else is willing to come up if that's the case? And if they do come up, like how far back are you willing to go? And then what do you do there? They had the 18th pick before in 2018, actually traded back with Green Bay, went back to 27, but then took Rashad Penny, which obviously didn't turn out to be like super great. So no, I think that, and this is also something I'm probably going to write about this week or maybe early next week, because my editor is on vacay, is this draft, the Seahawks genuinely feel, and I could see it to an extent, they could just do whatever. Like they don't need to chase a need. I genuinely feel that that's how they're looking at this, whether it's their first pick 50, pick 52, pick 82, 92, whatever. They generally feel that the roster is in good enough shape, on top of the guys who are on expiring contracts, because that's what this is about too. They can go anywhere. I was going through some like mocks just last night. I could justify legitimately pretty much any selection on with the first 5 picks, with the exception maybe of left tackle, if I plan on picking up Charles's option. Because after that, you got a bunch of guys on deals that the Seahawks can get out of or that are going to expire by March of 2026. So yeah, you may not feel like, oh, they don't need an edge rusher. Well, you look at it, man, DeMarcus Lawrence is basically on a 1-year deal. Chenna's got injury concerns. Maffe's on an expiring deal. Boom, I can justify taking an edge rusher because by 2026, I'll need him to start. You can kind of do that math with damn near every position outside of maybe inside linebacker. But even then, Ernest's deal is one that if they really needed to get out of it this time next year, it's a 1-year, $10 million deal.
Quarterback's the same thing too.
Yep, it'd be a 1-year, $37 million deal for Darnold, which sounds a little bit high on a 1 year, but that's less than the franchise tag, which I believe is $40 million. So every deal basically they can get out of outside of, Puck, we could do it right now. How many guys you think are guaranteed to be on the team? Or starters right now that are guaranteed to be on the team in 2026? It's only a handful.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's only a handful.
So you don't think, and they kind of, I think it was Macdonald, they kind of alluded to this. They're not going to be, their philosophy, and I think he talked about, I think it was in your piece actually, that if you go and chase for a need, he said, I've learned in the past you can make a mistake by doing that. Rather than chase a need that the philosophy for him and others is just take the best player available. And everyone kind of talks about that. I mean, they're not unique in that opinion. I mean, they clearly need there's a need in the interior offensive line, but it doesn't sound like that they will chase that in the first part of the draft, maybe in the first few rounds, if they don't feel that the players there are good enough. That they'll take I'm just spitballing here. If they grade a wide receiver at 18 higher than they grade any offensive lineman, they take a wide receiver there.
Yeah, and that's another position where you could say, well, they have Marquez Valdez-Scantling, they have Cooper Kupp, they have Jackson Smith and Jigba, but essentially they can get out of Kupp's deal after this year. I think it would be a very minimal, like a $16 million, I think, or something like that is what it turns into, like a 1 year 16 if they were to get rid of him. Marquez is only on a 1 year. So that basically leaves Jackson as the only guy you can say for sure will be on the roster in 2026. So you can justify a receiver pick in the first round. You can go down the line and do that. And so I haven't looked at the Ravens draft history since Mike Macdonald said that at the owners' meetings that he's been burned chasing need. I'd have to go really look and see where I could find that. But you can see plenty of instances where the Seahawks have chased a need on guys they maybe thought were better, and it's burned them. I think the most notable one was probably L.J. Collier. He was probably the highest defensive edge they had on the board, and because they had just traded Frank like a few days before, you can tell that was probably let's push him up the board because we don't have an edge rusher, knowing that he probably wasn't the highest graded prospect. Actually, I'm pretty sure he was not the most highly graded prospect on their board at the time.
I'm just thinking about the 21 draft, which a lot of Seahawks fans love to point to the 21 draft. I think it's the 21. Somebody can fact check me on this one. It's the draft they took D. Eskridge, and then of course
that's the 2021 class. Yes.
And it's 10 picks later, Creed Humphrey goes, right? And they needed, obviously there was a need for them at center. They don't get it. And then he's an all-pro, and I don't know where D. Eskridge is. He's probably out of football by now. And I wonder from their perspective how they thought about it. Was he the best player on their board, and they elected not to go to maybe a Creed Humphrey just because of the thought process of, well, we don't want to elevate him because he's not the best player rated on our board? Or was it, hey, D. Eskridge fits a need for us, and we're going to overvalue him here with this pick?
That was probably a little bit of both. But that draft, which I was also looking at last night, gets into, all right, cool, like you said, Puck, they're not the only team thinking let's take the best player available. But do we trust that they know who that is? No, seriously.
I know, I'm with you.
That's what it comes down to.
Sure.
Like let's say that 2021 class, they say, hey, we think D is the best player available. Yeah. Well, that would be a very bad eval, like independent of chasing the need or whatever, which I do. I agreed with it at the time, and I still do. Sure. Taking a wide receiver 3 at the time was fine. D taking him was fine. I thought they should have took Amon-Ra St. Brown in that same class, and it would have worked out just fine. Nobody would have cared if they had passed on Creed, if they'd have took the Sun God, right? But that's where I'm kind of at with the draft now. It's like, okay, cool. You're telling me, Mike Macdonald, John Schneider, you are going to take the best player available. And in John's case in particular, do I trust that you know who that's going to be when you're on the clock?
And I want to be fair with this, because I can recall what we talked about, the 3 years ago during the draft. This wasn't like, maybe this was for some people. I'm not sitting there going, hey, with that pick, they needed to take Creed Humphrey. This is the obvious pick. I mean, yeah, it's revisionist history to go back and look at where the careers are. But I do remember with the selection of Eskridge thinking, is that a need? That there was a need like this year's draft with help on the offensive line. And because there's been a need, especially at center since Max Unger left. Mm-hmm. And thinking, God, that's just, Eskridge, nice player, we get it, but seems redundant. So
there were people, Puck, that at the time I remember when we got feedback on our Seahawks Man to Man podcast that they were like, yeah, we should have took Creed Humphrey, real time, same weekend. It was some people. I wasn't, I'm not gonna act like I was watching a bunch of Creed tape.
Sure,
going into that.
Clear, yeah.
But there were people I'm going to get, because you'll probably get some comments like that too. Now there are people tweeting me and Chris and hitting us on the pod like, hey, why do we need another receiver? We
Right.
needed a lineman. Why don't we take Creed Humphrey? And they were right. That aged super well for those people.
And and so I think that the worry is how they have evaluated this offseason for them and how they're now going into the draft. And I know we've talked about this a lot before, but to me, that this philosophy of Schneider, there's a very Jerry DiPoto Mariners vibe to it, which is scary to me. And it's scary to me. No, we like the guys we have. Maybe you guys don't think they're good, but we think they're good. And listen, maybe he'll be right. Maybe Christian Haynes needs a new coach to coach him up, and Olawatimi and some of these other guys, and they'll turn them around. But boy, that's a huge gamble. It's a huge gamble that's your offseason plans, that this new staff that's going to come in is somehow going to make those guys better.
Well, not only is it a huge gamble, it's quite literally the same exact gamble as last year when you fired Pete. You say, well, we just need better coaching, so we're going to get a new coach. And you don't make the playoffs again. You get worse on offense. You do turn the defense around, which I would expect when you hire a defensive-minded guy. And then now you're right back a year later saying, well, we just need better coaching. It's like, how many times are we just going to keep putting the burden on the coaching? It's a collaboration. It's the get good players, coach them up. Eventually we got to look at the get good players part. I think that's where it's a gamble, but it's also repetitive. It's asking for quite a bit of benefit of the doubt on the roster acquisition. I think me and you have talked about this before, Puck. I am fascinated by how often John Schneider gets opportunities to clean up messes he created. It's like he said early in the offseason that the offensive line was the biggest deficiency. And he's basically saying, hey, I like the guys we have. Trust the process. We'll figure it out. But I would even have stopped him. I think it was during a radio interview. I would have stopped him and said, okay, how did it become your biggest deficiency? Who built the line that is, by your own admission, deficient? And if that was you, how do I trust you to fix that? Because it's not like this is year one or year two of it being deficient either. That's kind of where I'm at, because the process that John outlines and that Mike Macdonald outlines is even some of the philosophy on paper. It all makes sense. If you're not talking about a front office that's been here for 16 years or 15 years or whatever, that's a long time of having very similar deficiencies. Process be damned. You eventually need results if you want to win games.
And it's not like he's been void of, I don't want to make it seem like he's never not drafted, good offensive linemen. I mean, there are examples. Now there's not a ton. I mean, listen, Max Unger was the year before him, so they don't get credit for that one. But Russell Okung, and I know he battled some injuries late, but I thought Russell Okung was a fine draft pick. I mean, I don't know how you would evaluate Russell Okung, but I thought he was good enough. I think the early returns, I think Cross has been good. I think Lucas, when he's been healthy, has been good. But God, I mean, after that, who else am I missing?
So you named already the only Pro Bowl lineman.
That would be Okung.
Yeah, so there's that, and you're now missing the only player to sign a second-year deal with the Seahawks is Justin Britt, and that was after he moved from tackle to guard to center. It's that. This is where John he's in trouble because John's highly regarded around the league. It's crazy when I talk to GMs, coaches, scouts, whatever. Like the way the Seahawks do business is like generally like lauded down the league, and if you look at it, John has some pretty strong track records with certain positions. He's done well with DBs. He's done well with receivers. Mm-hmm. If you were to give him if you were like, oh, we got rid of DK, but I trust John to get us some good wideouts, I can actually hear you out on that, because that's probably the position he's drafted the best. Like you mentioned, Charles and Okung. That's over a decade of like pretty competent left tackle play on top of the acquisition of Dwayne Brown. However, the Dwayne Brown acquisition is another example of cleaning up a mess. You needed Dwayne because you just thought you could trot out a former power forward at Western Kentucky to play left tackle, and quickly realized maybe that wasn't a good idea. So it's like that. I think the Dwayne move kind of cancels out the years of George playing. But either way, like left tackle, he's kind of scouted really well. But the other, quite literally, his other biggest deficiencies are the trenches. Yeah. And then when that's your biggest deficiency, you're going to get a team that's just consistently not enough. It could be good, but it's not enough. And that, again, it goes back to the benefit of the doubt. John can say, yeah, we got to win up front. We got to be great up front when on the line of scrimmage, get off the ball on defense, get off the ball on offense. None of that sounds dumb. It's like, okay, do I trust you to go do it, put it in application. And eventually, like I said, you have to get it right, and that's eluded John and those guys, particularly in the trenches. And you can tell by how many guys they've drafted on the O-line or D-line that have made the Pro Bowl in 15 years.
Do you think hope is lost, though, for guys? Do you understand? Is there a small part of you that understands maybe a little bit of their thinking, that they think that the jury's not out yet on Oluwatimi and Haynes?
Yeah, I think that there's a world where Oluwatimi is a decent center, probably whatever Ethan Posick is currently, which is fine. Like, Ethan's a starting center in the NFL. He's not like super bad or super great. He's like a starting center. That's fine. Christian Haynes can probably be like a decent guard, maybe a tier below Damian Lewis, who I thought was really good, and that they should have tried to keep. But yeah, it's just hard when that's like the best you could probably do is like just get guys who are okay. When the teams that we see make these deep runs in the playoffs, it's because most of the time, and the NFC in particular, their lines are loaded. You look at what the Eagles have done. You look at what the Lions have done while they're so good. Even the Niners have had some issues here and there, but generally their lines have been very good, particularly in the playoffs, which is why they make those NFC championship runs. So you're going to have to get there. You're going to have to get there at some point. It's like, how long do we wait for you to figure that out? And how many more times they're just going to blame a new coach? Oh, well, maybe Kubiak's going to fix it. Well, he doesn't fix it. Now you can just put it on him. I just feel like the coaches are already getting set up to be scapegoated each year, and that they're one half of the people charged with putting a championship caliber product on the field.
Yeah, because I mean, like all the offensive line guys they've hired. I mean, who knows what they think about these guys? they may look at Oluwatimi and Haynes and go, yeah, we can't really win with this, but we'll try to put the lipstick on the pig. I mean, I mean, we would be millionaires if we could figure out that this is the one thing that has just eluded him as a president and GM, is just really fixing the interior group of this offensive line. Is there anything, just to circle back to the first round of the draft, is there any position group that would surprise you at 18?
Yeah, let's assume that they've already picked up Charles Cross's fifth-year option. I think the deadline for that is May 1st. That's before the draft, or that's after the draft, excuse me. Let's assume that they're just going to do that. So left tackle in that regard would be a surprise for me, because then you would have him under contract for 2 years. He's only 24. He doesn't have injury concerns. Like that would seem like overlap. That would seem like too much of a commitment to best player available, if that makes sense, because you do want your first round pick to be able to play within a year at least. And this guy, in theory, would not at all, unless he's just better than Cross. But then if that's the case, then what do you do with Charles, right? So that would be one. And the other would probably be running back. Ken Walker is on an expiring deal, but you have Zach Charbonnet under contract for 2 years. You have Kenny McIntosh under contract for 2 years still. And you just don't need any more running backs. I think the running backs they have are good. I don't think there's huge durability concerns with anyone, Ken included, really. So those two would probably surprise me. Anything else? Oh, one more. Center. I would just say center because John told us that the class stinks.
The class is terrible. Yeah.
The
class. Yeah. Well, but that also could be a bunch. And I think a lot of people agree with that. But I also wonder if he has his eyes on someone and wants to say that to kind of, I don't know, draw attention away from the group. But it's also an opinion that's shared by a lot of people.
Yeah, and I don't think John is a very good liar. At least when I talk to him, he seems like a very bad liar. At the combine, I asked him if they were going to have Tyler if he anticipated having Tyler on the team, and he asked him he seemed like a guy who, had 10 beers and you pull him over and it's like, hey man, you been drinking today? And he just froze up, and you could tell, he was lying. And before he started his press conference after the Geno trade, he looked at me and was like, hey man, no more direct questions. Last time I had to lie to you, so like, I can tell when he's lying. He made reference to that same exchange too. So when he said, I bring that up to say, when he said the center thing, that felt pretty genuine. Like, nah, these centers are not all that. So yeah, I wouldn't imagine them taking one in the first round.
Not in the first round, but you're not shocked at all if they take a running back. See, because I think they're gonna, and because I'm curious what they think about Walker. I don't think they're convinced that he's the guy. I mean, it's injuries or just whatever it is. I don't know. I'm not. If they want to play a different style of football or go back to that style of football, you can always have as many running backs as you possibly can. And with this class being as deep as it is, I wouldn't be surprised if they took one particular early. I agree with you. I don't think it's gonna be the first round, but
I think that would that would feel like getting greedy on the part of. I think the coaching staff would perceive that as a mistake. I'm taking one highly. I think I can't speak to how John views Ken. I necessarily have never asked or have never heard a soundbite that would lead me to lean one way or the other. But the coaching staff, I feel very confident telling you that they are high on all the backs, Ken included. Some people have asked me, how do I think Ken will look in this scheme? I tell people Ken is scheme proof. He is scheme proof. He can run gap. He can run zone. Yeah. It doesn't matter. Ken can be a top 10 running back. Yeah. Even if he never caught a pass, he would be great in this scheme because he's great in any scheme because he can cut, he can run, he's powerful, he can jump, he has breakaway speed. He's like whatever the tier below Saquon is, maybe that Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs tier of like, you can do everything. Like he's not like super huge, but zone scheme, gap scheme, I don't really care. Like Ken can do whatever. And I think the coaching staff agrees with my assessment there. And I think they would echo the same thing on the record, off the record, that they believe Ken is the guy, which is why it would surprise me, short of Ashton Genty being there. The first round, they wouldn't do it. Yeah. And I don't even think they would do it in the first 2 rounds, honestly. I think that's something that John has maybe learned a little bit on. It's like, dude, you got to change what your threshold is for taking a running back in the second round. Like Ken, it makes sense because he got the home run speed. But if you're not getting home run speed, you can, whatever that guy does well, you can probably get a little bit later.
In one of the pieces that you just wrote that's up there right now, Mike Macdonald, and again, I would say I think every GM every head coach would say the same thing, and his mentality of it is correct. If you go into a season thinking you can't win it all or have a chance, then it's kind of, I mean, honestly, even if you're a team that's terrible, it's kind of a loser mentality, really. You're expecting to lose. I think the mentality of every offseason going into a new season should be the expectation to win. He said it. I believe he believes it. They can win a Super Bowl. Answer that question. You think they can?
No, I don't think so. But I agree that should be the mindset. The reason I asked Mike Macdonald that I wanted it on record, really, just so everyone could know. It sounds like obvious, but sometimes it is just nice to hear the coach say it because then you can hold him accountable in that regard. Same thing with the GM. If you say it, then everything you do, I'm assessing based on your own expectations, not mine. Because what I think they should do each year, the fans, it doesn't matter. You guys are building, making all these moves and all these decisions based on that goal. So I'm going to frame, makes it easier to frame it that way. And no, I don't think so. I think they're going to have some issues up front. I don't think they'll be as bad last year up front on either side of the ball. But I do think they're going to have some issues, particularly when they just run into teams who can go win a Super Bowl. Even on defense, we haven't talked much about that unit because it was pretty good last year. But for good as it was, they give up like 57 points in those Packers and Green Bay games that mattered, games that were at home, like with their season that on the line, but like hanging in the balance, so to speak. And they just laid an egg. Now the offense did too. But so did the defense. They were not like the steel curtain in those. Yeah,
that's why we always talked about that last year. That's where I agree. I mean, I think there was improvement on that side of the ball, but yeah, there was an opponent factor that was into a lot of those games. So, I mean, I think it was better. I don't think it was as good as everyone thinks it was. Based especially when they had to get to some top tier opponents, but it'll be interesting. I agree with you. I mean, I think these coaches, they all have to say that you have to believe that because and I think Macdonald said it to you. If you don't believe it, then like, what's the point? What's the point going into a season? Like, oh, I think we're going to lose. Let me look at the schedule. Yeah, I think we'll lose that one, this one. Yeah, by that one, but I think we'll win it here. But
I mean, and realistically, guys probably do that, go in like, yeah, this one's going to be tough. We got to go at this team. Or, they know which games are going to be real battles. And, and maybe the veteran coaches know, no, we can lose to anybody on any given day. So they're kind of prepared for that. But I do think it's not just coach speaking that, like, we've heard some teams talk about how like a coach would get asked that and say, yeah, we're building something here. Like we're just taking it a day at a time. Like there is the diplomatic coach speak answer that isn't just, yes, we expect to win the Super Bowl. I don't know him, but I would imagine if you were to ask Brian Callahan, the head coach of the Tennessee Titans, like right now, like what are your expectations for 2025? He's probably not going to be as definitive. Maybe he has been asked that and I'm wrong, but I would imagine he would say something like, look, man, we're taking this day at a time. First, we need to take the draft, and we need to build a foundation, build our, he'd probably say one of those coachy answers. So it's not always for every coach just, yeah, of course you want to win the Super Bowl. Yeah. That's why I'm with you. I believe Mike, because there are other ways I've heard coaches answer that when it's not just an obvious, yes, that's our expectation.
Yep. All right, Mike, appreciate it as always. Thanks for always doing it. We'll continue to have you on throughout the NFL draft, which is almost here, just 3 weeks away. Appreciate it as always. Thank you for moving your schedule around with your family, and we'll talk to you next week.
All right, I've been watching my daughter here on the monitor. She's grabbed the camera here, so this is perfect timing. So all right, I'll see you, Puck. Go Cougs.
Right, go Cougs. There he is, Mike.